So as a woodworker, every now and again you get super duper lucky and you get a couple of lengths of free timber. You pick up some scraps on the side of the road. But very, very rarely you also get incredibly lucky and you pick up all these lengths of beautiful Tassie oak 19mm dressed on all sides for free. That's what's happened to me. It's amazing. Now the asking price for all that wood is just a couple of bottles of whiskey, which I am more than on board with. However, I thought instead of putting these in a couple of boring old brown paper bags, I might make a couple of nice boxes for them using the wood that the guys gifted to me. And they're not going to be normal boxes, of course. They're going to have corner post dovetails to join them all together. And yeah, to be perfectly honest, they're probably not going to care in the slightest what sort of packaging the bottles come in, but I'm a woodworker, so I'm going to make a box. So this was the practice box that I made using that same corner post joint. You can see it's got dovetails all the way around, and when you use contrasting colors, it's almost cheating. I mean, it looks so good, so good. I also put in a sliding plexiglass lid just by putting a groove around the box and then chopping off one of the edges. Very attractive little box. If you go and check out Timbecons on my own YouTube channels, you'll also see that there's a bunch of other joints that you can make with the Incra LS Positioner system. This is the book that comes with it when you buy it, and it goes through how to build out all of these different ones. It's a really, really cool system. Honestly, I'm really, really loving it. Highly recommend you check it out. If you do decide to check it out, Timbecon have very generously thrown a 10% discount on the price if you use the code that pops up somewhere on the screen around me now. 10% off. It's worth it. Now the Incra comes with all those resources, which makes it really easy to use. However, you can also do what I did and buy some aftermarket project books as well. So in these books, they've got some different projects that you can go through and build that take you step by step in exceedingly deep detail. But they also have a few extra joints that you can test out that aren't in the original reference templates. And one of those is the corner post joint. That's what we're going to do today. So to kick it off, you prep your timber and select your pattern. I'm using 12mm Tassie oak and Jarrah, and I've chosen the template called MDovC. As for the width of my boards, well, I needed to fit a bottle of whiskey, so I've gone about 116mm wide. You can see when I place my workpiece over the full-size template that my boards are going to end up with half a pin left on the edges of the A template and nothing on the edges of the B template. So that means that my tails are going to be made on the B cuts, whereas my pins are going to be on the A cuts. Now that might sound confusing, but it really isn't once you do this a couple of times. Let's go. So just like any joints on the Incra, the very first things that you need to do are to center your boards on the jig and then also set the height of your router bit. The router bit height is really easy. You just set it to the recommended number that's on the template, you cut out a test, and then you tweak and repeat that cut until you get a nice tight fit. You can see here that my fit is too loose, so I've raised the bit by a couple of mil, cut it again, and now I've got a nice tight one. The next step is centering the router bit to your board. It's really important to make sure that you get really nice crisp joints, that you've got it centered perfectly on the jig. All you do is make a cut, then flip your board around again and make another cut. Now that joint that we've cut is going to be slightly wider than the router bit, so we want to center it. We're going to use the micro adjust feature of the fence to do that. Just tweak it ever so slightly until you've got the same gap on both sides. And the final setup step is to slide your template over so that your suggested center point is right underneath the mark on the Incra. So now we can actually start cutting our joint. The very first step is to cut rabbets into two ends of two of the boards of your box. It's much cleaner cutting these rabbets if you make multiple cuts instead of cutting the whole 6mm or whatever it may be in one pass. And now with that done, we can get stuck into cutting the tails. If you line up all four boards like this, each one of the cuts will be backed up by another one, so you'll get no tear out. For the very first tail that you're going to cut on the edge of your board, instead of going straight to the B mark, I like to work my way up towards it, taking multiple small bites. It just means that you get a much cleaner cut that way. But then with the rest of them, it's just move to the mark, make a cut, move to the mark, and make a cut. And all you have to do once you've made your last cut is unclamp everything, flip it over, keeping the same side against the fence so that everything's lined up, and then make those same cuts again. There's really nothing to it. Now, if you're wondering what I'm doing when I'm moving the fence over, all it is I'm sliding it over until the next B cut is underneath that center mark. I move it there, make my cut, and then I move it over to the next one and make the next cut. Very, very simple. With that done, we can now cut grooves into the contrasting timber. We're going to follow the beam markings again here. Now, you don't need to go all the way through your board. I recommend that you don't, because when you do cut really long grooves, you can weaken the board and make it flex a little, which can ruin your cut. You only need to go far enough that you can cut out 4 biscuits to insert into the ends of those boards. Go slow, use a quality rubber-soled push block and put a heap of pressure down and into the fence, especially when you're reversing the cut, because you don't want this to get away from you. Now that I've finished cutting those grooves, I need to cut some biscuits out of these boards. I find it easiest to make these little cross cuts on the table saw, but you could also use the miter saw or a hand saw if you wanted to. You only need 4 of these biscuits, but sometimes I do cut out 1 or 2 extra, just in case you drop them. They're a little bit delicate until you've glued them in. And speaking of gluing them, that's all you need to do. Glue them into the ends of your 2 tail boards, and then give them about an hour or so to set up and dry. They already look good, don't they? Once they've dried, a minute or 2 on the sander and you'll be able to clean them up so they're nice and flush. Just make sure that you don't change the length or the width of your boards overall. You just want to clean up the biscuits so that they're flush with the faces. Now, once those boards are flush, we're going to cut them again, but this time we're going to lie them down and we're going to cut the pins into the ends. It's pretty much exactly the same as before, but instead of following the B cuts, now I'm following the A cuts. The really cool thing here is that once I made all these cuts, I realized that I hadn't cut them deep enough. So I had to reset my stop block and then make all the same cuts again. However, because the Incra is so accurate, I was able to make those cuts in the exact same positions again, and it all worked out perfectly. So one thing I found during this project is that Tassie oak is extremely splintery. So I did have to go through with a knife and clean up those ends. On some woods you have to, on others you don't. It's always fun when you test fit the box and put it together for the very first time, and this worked out absolutely perfectly. It is almost cheating using the Incra. It makes the boxes come out so nice. Look at these. So I'm going to skip over the detail for this video. If you want to find out a bit more about these boxes and how I finished them off, jump over to the Woodfathers channel on YouTube and I'll have a video up there at the same time. But essentially, I've put a groove in for the plexiglass to sit in, and now I've rabbited out a base so that I can slide in some really nice pine that I managed to find in my stockpile. I won't rob you of the joy of watching the finish go on though. I've used boiled linseed oil here because I was just after something nice and quick, and honestly I quite like the smell as well. So I just slather it on, and then about 10 minutes later I go and wipe it all off and get rid of the excess. And then we've got 2 beautiful boxes with sliding lids, corner post dovetails all the way around. They look fantastic. And honestly, that's how easy it is to make beautiful boxes with beautiful joinery on the Incra LS Positioner. I really recommend you go check it out. The more I use it, the more I love it. I've got lots of videos on Timbecon's channel for different types of joints that you can make on it. And don't forget, there's that 10% discount if you use my code. So there you go, a couple of really beautiful boxes to store whiskey. And when the guys are done, they can take this out and use them as a display box as well. Pretty cool. If you've got any questions about the video or the technique or the Incra and all that sort of fun stuff, leave them down below and I will do my very best to respond. If you've got any questions around where the timber came from and if there's any more of it to come, too bad. I'm not answering that one. Cheers, gang.